Hello again. This is the first thoughty in quite a while. I have been thinking quite a lot of thoughties, but not getting them on video due to time constraints, now being a mum of two these days. Yes, and Zeb's still here. Say hello, Zebedee. Zebedee. And Polly's as well. Not sure where she is though. Yes, anyway, those cat fans among you. Yes, homeschooling. I'm going to have a little chat about homeschooling because it is quite a big deal amongst, there is quite a big overlap, between the, autistic and home ed community. So it is, a related issue. Amongst neurodiversity and, special needs, disability, etc. generally. As, one reason, people quite often turn to it is because the education system just doesn't really allow for much deviation from the standard model. I'm going to sort of go through a few. I'm a home educator myself. My son is he would have started school this September. But I have been kind of working towards, teaching him to read and write and such for quite a long time. My daughter's only a small baby, so it's not really a thing that we're working on for her yet. But as she gets older, that my plan is, unless there's some sort of drastic change of circumstances, to homeschool her as well. Neither of my children do have any kind of neurodiversity or disability themselves, as far as I'm aware, at the moment. I have thought for a long time that it's, something I can do, so I will. It's very much my first choice. I just find that a lot of the time, parents come to it as a last resort, when they cannot, get support for their kids' special needs, or, their kids are being bullied or whatever, and, the school isn't doing anything about it. And then they turn to homeschooling and just say, why didn't I do this all along? I've known a few people who've done that, actually. It seems quite common. I'll start off by going through a few sort of FAQs, myths, whatever you want to call them. I think the most common thing that comes up is, but how do they socialise? How do they make friends? Which I think is a really odd question, because, it's... How does anybody who is not physically present in a school at this moment socialise? I don't know, how do you socialise? My son plays with the kids in the street. He goes to actual designated home education social groups. He's on a football team. He used to do a gymnastics class. He socialises. He has lots of friends. He enjoys being with other kids. But it's nice that I know who his friends are and what he's actually doing with them, and they're friends that he's met because he enjoys their company, not just because he happens to be stuck in a room with them 5 days a week. This is I don't know if this is, a general thing that a lot of parents notice, but for my son specifically, I do notice he has a habit of latching on to sort of quite badly behaved kids, the really naughty, hyperactive ones, and copying everything they do. So it's... I would have homeschooled him anyway, but I think that's something that, for him specifically, makes it a good option, because I can actually see who his friends are and tell him, now that boy's been a bit of a bully, isn't he? He's not a nice friend. Or, oh yeah, they're good friends. They're playing nicely, aren't they? They don't exclude people and pick on people, do they? They're good friends. Yeah, you can play with them. Whereas if he was going to school, I wouldn't necessarily know if, he was being a troublemaker because, until it really became a problem. At least the way he is now, I can sort of observe him and, see what he's up to. And, any sort of issues I notice with his behaviour, I can just kind of nip it in the bud, have a little talk to him myself, and make sure he knows, what is okay and what isn't. And certainly in a class of 30 kids, the teacher is not going to give them all individual attention and be able to speak to each one individually. I don't know how they manage, to be honest. If you imagine, say, a childcare setting, a childminders, or a kids club or something. You walked in and there was one permanent trained member of staff and one part-time assistant trying to control 30 kids. Would you send your child there? And yet we do it every day. Well, I don't, obviously, but it's very much a cultural norm to do it every day at school. Just send your child to be kind of herded by one child herd, and expect them to come out of that experience with an education. Don't get me wrong. There are advantages to school. It's free and legal childcare, and that doesn't mean it's particularly good quality or convenient. Unless you happen to be lucky enough to have a job that lets you work maybe 4 or 5 hours a day, Monday to Friday in term time, near to the school. Maybe you're a school dinner lady or something, a school classroom assistant. If that it happens to be your job, it's perfect. But if you, work longer than school hours, it's far from ideal. It reduce your babysitter bill, I suppose. A few hours a day you don't have to pay for, your child to be somewhere that they are at least being fed and to some extent occupied. Is it occupation at school? Are they being occupied? I wasn't particularly. I was bored out of my mind most of the time. But I suppose I'm not necessarily a model of the average. Hence this vlog. But yes, what is school actually good for? If, say, you speak a foreign language at home and you want your child to get a good grasp of English, well, it's good for that, They're around other English speakers every day, picking up the local vernacular. I think it's, for things like getting GCSEs, I suppose it's convenient. You just sort of automatically do them at school. You don't actually have to make the effort to, sign them up for, being able to do exams and things. I'm just trying to think what else it is good for. But yes, there are benefits to going to school. But the thing is, my kids have got a stay-at-home dad, and I only work part-time myself, and my mum is currently working part-time, looking to retire in the next year or two. So ultimately, I don't really need childcare. But yes, if you do, it is a bonus. To have a few hours a day free. The one thing I've been asked, another sort of FAQ myth, if you like, is, isn't it lots of effort? It's too much effort to homeschool. And I noticed this a lot during lockdown, when everyone was forced to homeschool for a few months. But I think there's a world of difference between, someone who has to do it because of an extraordinary circumstance, such as a worldwide pandemic. It doesn't happen very often, does it? Someone who's actually planned to do it and, made that decision for themselves. I think a lot of parents just sort of send the kids off to school without really thinking about it, and they just sort of take it as, part of the course, that you're going to have to get up early in the morning and make them a packed lunch, or, prepare their dinner money and everything. Put them in the uniform, make sure they've got clean uniform and clean PE kit, they've got everything they need, all the pens and pencils and everything. Get them off to school, and go and pick them up again at closing time. And then occupy them for the evening. Which, they don't see that as effort, they just see that as, part of parenting. This is what I signed up for when I had a child. Whereas, when you're homeschooling, you very much set your own timetable. It depends a lot on how you plan to do it. There are a lot of different methods, probably as many different methods as there are homeschooling families. But, you can decide very much whether you are going to have a specific time of day. You're going to sit down and have school time, whether you're going to do the unschooling method, where you don't have any sort of set routine, you just let the children kind of explore for themselves and decide what they want to do a lot of the time. I think if you have kids who are sort of very active and curious and wanting to do everything, then, the unschooling method is great. If your children are sort of naturally quite lazy and will just sit around playing computer games all day, unless you actually prod them with a stick or whatever and try and get them up and down to the woods for looking at trees day, or whatever it is that you're planning, it's not such a great idea. The theory is that, given choices, given freedom, that children will want to explore, they will be curious, they will ask questions. I'm not convinced myself that every child will. I think there is some guidance needed. Now, if you take my son as an example, I have, needed to really push him to try and get some literacy work done. There are things he's interested in. He's quite interested in things like geography and history and things. And I've got this big map here, and he sometimes points to countries on the map and asks, what goes on there. And he's interested in soldiers at the moment. He likes playing soldier games. So, if I start talking to him about, history, about wars and things, he does enjoy that. But, he would not read unless I actually said to him, right, we're going to do a bit of reading work today. We're going to do some work on, recognising letters and things. Actually, he has just today started actually writing letters by himself. He did that this morning. And I've been trying to coax him into doing that for nearly a year now. It's my sort of project for this year, get him writing. And here we are, 7th of November, and he's just started to form some letters by himself. Yes! At last. But I think it's just a bit of a shame that, that there is this expectation that children at about 4 or 5 years old will start learning to write. I think if I'd just left him to it, I think he would have eventually realised that life is easier if he can read and write and started wanting to do it himself. But I think, other people have been saying to him, yeah, but how's he going to read and write? Can he read and write yet? And sort of being a bit judgmental maybe because he isn't starting to read and write at the same sort of age that most children are. So yeah, I felt like we had to rush him a bit with that, whereas maybe if we'd have left him, he would eventually have done it himself. Maybe not. I don't know. But here we are. And I think as well, something that people don't realise about homeschooling is that everybody does it. You know, if you think about, it's a lot of effort to homeschool your children. I haven't got that sort of time. The thing is, any halfway decent parent homeschools their children and sends them to school as well. You know, if you're looking after your own children, weekends, evenings, school holidays, when they're preschool, you know, you are homeschooling. You know, if you read to them from a book, you are teaching them to read. You know, if you go out and play football with them, you teach them PE. If you take them to a museum, you're teaching them history. If you go on holiday, you teach them about other cultures. You know, it's every experience a child has is a learning experience. Every new thing you do with them is somehow beneficial. You know, it's very easy to make anything you do into, you know, something of educational value. You know, a shopping trip. I mean, not so much as they get older and they, you know, they're familiar with sort of numbers and how to read and cookery and all this kind of thing. But certainly when they're small, when they're just learning about these things, you know, you can take them to the shops and say, you know, how much does this cost? And practice reading numbers. And then the next stage is, right, so we bought this that's 99 pence and this that's 99 pence. So how much have we spent? You know, and make it into maths. You know, I mean, that is the things that they need to know for life. I mean, a big issue that I have with school, and I'm definitely not alone in this, is how much time is wasted on completely irrelevant rubbish. I mean, I was thinking once, when did I last use something that I'd learned in a school maths lesson? I think that the last thing I learned that I've actually used since school was long division. And that was only because I wanted to sort of test myself and see if I could remember how to do it. I could have just used a calculator, but, you know, I thought, well, I'm going to write it. I'm going to, you know, have a bit of a go and see if I can remember what I'm doing, and I could. So that was okay. And I did that in year 6. So everything I learned at secondary school in maths lessons, you know, 3 lessons a week for 5 years, was a complete waste of time. I mean, I got my, you know, my GCSE in maths and everything, but, you know, I've not gone on to study maths. It wasn't a particular, you know, I never wanted to be a mathematician or, you know, any particular career that needed a GCSE in maths. So, you know, what was the point of it all? I mean, I could, if I was particularly interested in these things, study them. You know, I could have bought myself a textbook. I could have looked at websites. I mean, you can get tutors. You know, you can actually hire someone to come round to your house and give your child a lesson if, you know, if they have a particular talent that it's, you know, it's worth investing in nurturing that talent. The thing is, I wasted all that time in GCSE, in, you know, secondary school maths. It's, you know, all that about, you know, the Pythagoras theorem and quadratics and simultaneous equations and things. It's completely irrelevant to my life. I don't know why you would need to do all that. I mean, it used to make me laugh when, you know, they were trying to sort of think up problems in textbooks that might make you, you know, some sort of everyday situation where you might need trigonometry. Like you're trying to photograph something from a high building. How many floors up will you need to go to, you know, get the right angle and things? And think, well, if you're trying to photograph something from above and you're using a high building to get a sort of aerial shot, You just look out the window. If you need to go a bit higher, you go up to the next floor. You don't get your pencil and paper out and try and do it by trigonometry, do you? You do it by trial and error in real life. I mean, that's not to say I won't ever bother teaching my kids trigonometry if they're interested in it, you know. Well, I could do it from memory, or I could, you know, get a textbook. As I say, you know, there are ways of doing these things. Especially now in the age of the internet, you know, all of human knowledge is available at the touch of a button, if you can read and write, you know. Well, type, if you can read and type. It's really not as inaccessible as it was, you know, 20 years ago, when homeschooling really wasn't as big as it is now. I mean, certainly I would have killed to have been homeschooled myself when I was a child, if I'd have had any idea that it was a thing. I'll go on to results of a survey I saw once. I mean, this was pre-lockdown, so I don't know if, you know, attitudes have changed. Apparently, about 100,000 children did not go back to school after lockdown, so, you know, presumably their parents decided that homeschooling was the way forward. They sort of changed their mind, or hadn't had their eyes open to what it was really all about, and decided, yeah, this is better. Anyway, this was pre-lockdown. It said, this was a YouGov poll. It said, you know, should homeschooling be allowed? And 11% of people said it should not be legal in any circumstances. Under any circumstances, you know, even if you've got a disabled child, you know, who, you know, is just not able to take part in mainstream schooling, or who, you know, has very specific needs that, you know, special schools don't cater for. You know, under no circumstances. And that's 11%, which doesn't sound very much until you realise it's about 1 in 9. About 1 in 9 people are completely against homeschooling in any way. Which it really shocked me, actually. I mean, what do they think it's all about? I mean, I don't know if these are the how do they socialise brigade. You know, thinking you just lock your child in a room with a book. I don't know. I don't know how they come up with that opinion. Yeah. But yeah, it's I did actually come across someone on the internet who was extremely angry about the whole concept of homeschooling, saying if I had my way, it would be banned. And I think her main argument was that children are being indoctrinated by their parents. Being indoctrinated by the state is fine. You know? Who do we trust to educate children? Their parents or the government? I mean, imagine you lived in a world that was not the sort of capitalist hellscape we currently live in, where people could, you know, choose their hours. They didn't have to sort of work several days a week. You could, you know, choose to stay at home and raise your children as much as you liked. You know, we all had good access to information and everything. Imagine we lived in that sort of world, and then someone came up with this idea, right? The government are going to start a scheme. We want all children between the ages of 4 and 16 to attend an institution for about 7 hours a day, 5 days a week, where they will be educated. And they said it in quite a sinister voice like that. They will be educated. Or maybe they didn't use a sinister voice, I don't know. But you knew what it meant. What would you say? Would you say, oh yeah, that sounds like a great idea, take my kids. Take them away. I don't want to see them. I produce these children, but you know, I've had enough now. I must remove them from my sight. Because, I mean, I know everyone claims to love their kids more than anything on earth and everything, but I'm not going to say all schoolgoers' parents have this attitude, right? But I do see a lot of, you know, parents who are really fed up that the school holidays are on the way and they're going to actually have to do some parenting. I can kind of see the issue of, you know, they still need to go to work and they need to pay for a childminder and all this kind of thing, but yeah, they really struggle to think up things to do with their children every day. And I think, well, you had these children, you know, you went through 9 months of pregnancy and birth, and, you know, you've supported them all these years. What did you do all that for? Are you not interested in actually enjoying their company? I mean, yeah, they can be a bit annoying. Yes, they do sort of ramble on and on and on about, you know, whatever TV show they're into at the moment. But, you know, there's things you can enjoy together, you know. Why did you have them if you don't want to spend time with them? But yes, that's a particular subsection of the school parents. Yeah, I'm not by any means saying that about every single one of them. So yeah, that's I think I've covered most things that are, you know, of great advantage about homeschooling in general. Of course, for neurodivergent kids in particular, school is pretty hellish. You know, you know, got attention deficit, and you're sort of required to sit still and concentrate on the task in hand, whether it's, you know, of any particular interest to you or not. You know, that's a recipe for disaster. You know, that's why they end up misbehaving a lot of the time. And for me, as an autistic kid, you know, sort of being stuck in a room with, you know, the bright lights and the noise and the sort of enforced activities, and, you know, just being sort of chucked out into the bear pit of the playground, where I'm kind of expected to interact with other kids and sort of conspicuous by the fact that I sort of preferred to sit in the corner with my hands over my ears. You know, that kind of thing. It's yeah, it's not ideal. Dyslexics have to actually have a piece of paper to prove that they're a bit behind on reading and writing, and it's not their fault. And they kind of have to sit on a table near the teacher where the teacher can give them some extra attention, and you know, all the rest of the class all thinks, well, that's the stupid table where the kids who, you know, who can't read and write sit. They don't understand that it's a medical condition. Yeah, I remember that quite clearly, actually, the table for the dyslexic kids. And it all comes from this, you know, the difficulty of having to herd 30 children. I mean, in private schools they have smaller classes, but it's, who can afford private school? Who's even got access to a private school if they have got the money? Where's your nearest private school? Oh, and don't get me started on faith schools. I mean, my school was not even a faith school, and every day we had hymns and prayers and Bible readings. I mean, there's the daily act of collective worship, right? And that's what they call it. It's actually law that you have to have a daily sermon. I mean, I think they have to say it's broadly Christian in nature. I think that's the word. I may be wrong on that. But yeah, there are. There's my clock, the famous clock. And there are schools, specifically for Muslim or Jewish or any other religion. If you happen to live within a reasonable distance of one, and you are of that faith, and they teach a version of that faith that you are interested in, then yeah, that's fair enough. But if the only school in your area is a faith school and you're an atheist, or it's the wrong faith, then you've got your kids being taught something every day that's, I mean, not only against your beliefs but also irrelevant. I mean, I've talked about the irrelevance of a lot of school education already. But yeah, the amount of religion that gets pushed on kids, and if your class teacher is religious, I had a teacher at primary school who was a Catholic, and she was always telling us about, oh, nobody's really atheist because where do you think they go when you die? I mean, that's stupid, isn't it? You think you just die? Well, you can't believe that. You've got to think something. And, there are already some kids in the class, we're only sort of 9, 10 years old, but there were already some in the class who kind of challenge her on that, and she'd just shout them down and say, no, you can't believe that. And, religions other than Christianity were sort of described as what they do, whereas, Christian beliefs were described as what we do. And I found as soon as I left primary school and I was not having this shoved in my face every single day, I stopped believing. I was a committed Christian as a small child because I went to school every day and I was told, this is what you believe. I thought, oh, all right then, and I'm being told this at school, so it must be true. I mean, my parents and grandparents, they don't take me to church or anything, so maybe I'll go to hell. Oh dear. And yeah, I was afraid of, being struck down by a thunderbolt or something if I blasphemed, And then as soon as I went to secondary school, I thought, hang on, we've not had any religious sermons for a while. What's going on there? No one here is having terrible things happen to them. We're not all being tortured by little devils, prodding us down into the gates of hell. What's going on there? Oh, maybe it's not true. And then I realised it was all a big lie, I mean, I apologise if you are actually religious yourself. That's the conclusion I came to, when I was 11. I don't mean to insult your beliefs or anything, but yeah, that's how my mind worked. I have dabbled in religion since, but it's yes, I'm sorry if you feel your faith has been insulted by that. Yeah, there is an objection to homeschooling as well. That some parents do it because they feel the need to raise their children in a particularly religious curriculum, if you like. which I'm sort of on the fence about that. I mean, on one hand, yeah, they've got a right to, teach their children their own beliefs. Obviously, they've managed to get through life with their religious faith. Can't be that bad. On the other hand, are they stunting their child's development if they're sort of only teaching them of evolution and abstinence and such? Yeah, it's a tricky one, that. Yeah, there are inspectors that come around and make sure that the children are literate and they're not being abused or anything. So if they're happy with the situation, then can't be that much of a problem. Although you can refuse access, you do have a right to refuse access to the inspectors, which, there's a case for, do you have a right to keep the state out of your home? You're taking your children out of school, so they're not being taught what the government wants them to be taught. But you're still getting these inspectors going around making sure they're, learning the required things. But on the other hand, who's, if the children are in a cult or something, then they could sort of do with somebody from outside checking up and making sure things are okay. Yeah, I haven't actually come across any religious people while I've been homeschooling. Most people I've met are sort of a bit hippie-ish and want to just kind of get the kids away from the the enforced schooling business. And as I say, I've met a few people who have disabled kids that were struggling in school with the resources that were allocated, or not getting any resources at all. I've been going on for nearly 40 minutes, haven't I? Yes, it is a big issue that I feel quite strongly about. As you can see from the fact I am actually homeschooling. But yeah, I've talked long enough. I have talked long enough, and I'm going to leave it there. Maybe I'll come back to this later, and I'll see you in the next one.